Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this program. Tonight, we'd like to discuss this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3. In my view, this is nothing new. This is just one of the endless political problems that the nation has had since independence in 1980. We've had one political crisis after another. And this is just a manifestation of that political crisis. In other words, one of the first political crises that Zimbabwe had was, of course, the infamous Gukurahundi in 1983 to 1987. So this Constitutional Amendment Bill is nothing more than Gukurahundi Mark 5 or Mark 6, depending on which other political crisis the nation has had in the last 46 years. The tragedy is, of course, we failed to address Gukurahundi and what caused it. And that failure is manifesting itself now with what we see. Because those who do not learn from the past always end up repeating the same mistake over and over again. So we are facing Operation Gukurahundi, Mark 6 or whatever, because we never addressed Gukurahundi, the first one, in 1983 to 1987. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Ben, welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. I got to agree with what you just said there. For me, this whole CAB3 is about bestowing power on one individual, basically making a king. The problem that we have is we have, and we've seen this with ZANU-PF from the very beginning, where they create a demigod, untouchable, powerful, and, all-knowing, no questions asked. Basically, untouchable. And this is exactly what this bill intends to do and is all about, which I find if it goes through, and most likely it will go through, will create one party state, one center of power, and nobody else will ever have any say. If there was a say in the first place, it will outright be taken away. That's how I see this bill.
Well, I did mention that this bill is Gukurahundi Mark 6. Gukurahundi of 1983 to 1987 was about power. The primary purpose of Kokura-Wundi was for ZANU-PF to consolidate its power. Period. As much as Mugabe and his cronies would want the nation and the rest of the world to think that Kokura-Wundi was about anything else, the truth of the matter is it was primarily to force PF ZAPU to give up its independence as an independent political party, because that was the only other party that constituted a serious political challenge to ZANU-PF's hold on power. ZANU-PF has never been confident about its ability to hold power through free, fair, and credible elections. That much has been very clear. Even the first elections in 1980, as much as the Lancaster House agreement was that all PF ZAPU and ZANU-PF were to withdraw their freedom fighters from the field during the campaign period leading up to the 1980 elections. They agreed to that. But by the time the ZANU-PF leaders got back to Zimbabwe, they changed their mind. ZANU-PF did not withdraw all its political operatives from the field. Many of them were kept there, and they were given specific instructions to tell the electorate that if ZANU-PF does not win, then the Bush War would continue. That was their agenda, period. The people voted to end the Bush War. And they thought that would bring peace. They were wrong. Because 3 years later, 1983, ZANU-PF was on the war footing again. This time to eliminate the only other political party that constituted a serious challenge to ZANU-PF's hold on power, i.e. PF ZAPU. They were determined to force PF ZAPU to give up its independence as a separate entity and join up with ZANU-PF, or else be crushed. That is the truth. And the 1983 to 1987 Kokura-Wundi was to achieve those 2 points. And this is why we are saying now, if you look at this constitutional amendment bill, this is a path we've been traveling since 1980. ZANU-PF is still fighting to consolidate its stranglehold on power. Benjamin was absolutely right there. The primary purpose of this constitutional amendment bill is to consolidate ZANU-PF's stranglehold on power. If the bill was to pass, it will consolidate ZANU-PF's wish that ZANU-PF should rule Nyanga. I think it is important that people understand that what this constitutional amendment bill is and the path we have taken to get here.
What I think is very, very important to mention, because what people are posting on social media and talking about is the term extension. That is what is really making the grounds. But we need to realize that this whole CAB3 actually has up to 21 clauses that it seeks to amend within the Constitution. 21. It's not just about the election cycle. It's how you elect the president. How even the whole voting system operates, from ZEC being changed to back to the Register General's office. You are talking of the president having to appoint judges without any public hearing. It's a big and a huge change. Basically, what this whole thing is saying, we don't want to have a say. Whoever is supporting it is saying, we don't want to have a say. We are going to give all our rights to the one individual that is president to run the entire show, no questions asked. You are going to make the right decision for us. It's basically giving away all your say. And this is the scary part. We are so focused on the one part and forgetting that the word I used before, a demigod, the king. It's no longer about the president. Whoever becomes president basically becomes king. And the king is never wrong. The king is never questioned. In short, goodbye democracy. Goodbye democracy. This is what it basically stands for. So when I really look at it, I think a lot of Zimbabweans really do not understand the whole picture. We are so focused on the current extension. Even after 2030, whoever is going to come after 2030 is going to inherit this, is going to be king. We're no longer, electing a president. We are basically asking parliament to install us a king. There's no way you're going to touch him. The appointment of judges is direct. He says anything and everything. We are now just there as stooges. For me, I think this is just the simple way to say, we have failed democracy. We are just going to continue with a dictatorship. No questions asked, hands down, we are all in.
Well, I've said my that the Kukura Wundi was more about ZANU-PF dominating PF SAPO. Here is the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo saying exactly that.
We have people beating up people. Why must people beat each other? Why must people beat the next person? Why must you teach people to hate? This is no time to teach people to hate each other. This is the time to teach people to respect each other, to accept each other, not to hate, not to roar, not to kill. It is because we don't understand. Nobody must go about running around with grenades and with AKs at this time to try and persuade people by means of that. If you go about running around with AKs to persuade people, because you have no support. If you have support, you don't do things like that.
He was absolutely right. ZANU-PF launched Gukurahundi for the purposes of consolidating its own power. Mugabe and company were not sure that if there were free, fair, and credible elections, they would win them. And so they sought to consolidate their own power by creating a de facto one-party state, which is exactly what happened as soon as PF SAPU signed the Unity Accord. ZANU-PF created a de facto one-party state. And if you think that they should have been content with that, you're wrong. Because as soon as the agreement was signed, the Unit Accord was signed, the party, ZANU-PF, launched to consolidate its hold on power. Zimbabwe has never held free, fair, and credible elections. Never. And whenever the party felt its hold on power threatened, its reaction has always been the same: to use brute force. To beat up people, to even kill them, to consolidate its hold on power. That is the tragic reality. Just to remind those of you who would like to join us on this platform, you can use the link at the bottom of your screen there to join us. And you can have your say on this issue. What we are talking about tonight is this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3, and that it is just a continuation of what Zimbabwe has seen these last 46 years. ZANU-PF fighting to consolidate its hold on power at all costs. This is just the Constitutional Amendment Bill. It's just another milestone along that path. Ben.
You know, what is said here is that a lot of Zimbabweans actually believe that Zimbabwe was a democracy in the first place, and that this here actually threatens. And I love the word that you used. Zimbabwe was never a democracy from the very beginning. They never held free, fair, and credible elections since the very beginning. So what we are finding is we are living in a delusional. Sorry about that.
One of the other fights that we would like to mention here is the fight against the opposition, MDC-CCC. By the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe realized that ZANU-PF will never deliver their fundamental rights, including the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And by then, the nation decided that either we go back to the bush and fight for our freedom from scratch, or we elect an opposition that will implement the necessary democratic changes to end this ZANU-PF dictatorship. The decision was made to elect an opposition whose number one task would be to implement the democratic changes necessary to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. ZANU-PF felt power slipping through their fingers. The de facto one-party state was not holding. And their reaction was to attack the opposition leaders and their supporters. So since 1999, when MDC was launched, the regime has been after the opposition. The elections were never free, fair, and credible. And the only time that the nation did have something close to free, fair, and credible elections was in 2008. When SADC forced ZANU-PF to implement a number of fundamental changes to force the regime into holding what one can only call the nearest we ever got to free, fair, and credible elections. When Mnangagwa and Chiwenga saw the results of the 2008 coming, they stepped in, pushed ZEC aside, and here is what followed.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. He found Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost the election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns. I was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, you stay where you are. And then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. I don't know. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away. No? And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth.
This is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. We have been down this road for 46 years and counting, experiencing firsthand the brutality of the ZANU-PF dictatorship.
Sorry for the interruption, Elliot. What I was trying to say was, you know, we have been living in this cocoon and in this delusional world where we actually believe that Zimbabwe is a democracy and we can vote for our president, and elections are healthy, elections are good for us. Yet we all know, and we have read reports after reports, not just the 2023 election report, you know, from all observers, but even the elections, 2018 and so forth. They've all stated that our elections are not free, fair, and credible. So the idea that you find that even the opposition themselves keep saying that, you know, we want to vote for our president, this bill takes away. There was never free, fair, and credible elections. There was never voting for the president. If we were voting for the president, I am sure by now ZANU-PF would be no more. So we are at a stage where the outside world sees the fuss in our democracy and what we perceive as democracy. Yet we that are closer to home cannot see anything wrong with how we conduct our elections. In fact, we are fighting not to end, rigged elections, but we are fighting to continue with the system that we have. We are fine with this current system. We don't want anything better. It really bothers me that, after 46 years, Zimbabwe has never had free, fair, and credible elections, like you said, Robert. And we are still continuing to fight for more, rigged elections. We are not trying to fix any problem here. Yes, CAB3 wishes and intends to consolidate more, but already a lot has been taken. We need to get that day back first. And I think this is the biggest challenge that Zimbabweans have failed to understand, that Zimbabwe is not a democracy, that the opposition and ZANU-PF want to picture it to be. It's actually the opposite. Zimbabwe has never had free, fair, and credible elections since day one.
Well, along the way came the JNU. Credit where credit is due. SADC forced ZANU-PF to sign the Global Political Agreement of 2008, following the blatant cheating of the March 2008 vote, by Mnangagwa and his Operation Mapotera Papi group, and more, even worse still, the blatant, the wanton violence that accompanied the runoff. The unfortunate reality is that not even one token reform was implemented. The number one task of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to ensure that the blatant cheating in the March vote count and the wanton violence in the runoff would never happen again. But as we know, not even one token reform was implemented in the 5 years of the GNU. And the GNU was tasked to write a new constitution. And that turned out to be just another sick joke. Because the MDC leaders wasted so much time and they were completely outmaneuvered by ZANU-PF. We were traveling along the path, like I said, of Gokurawundi. ZANU-PF was consolidating its iron grip on power. And this is why the GNU failed to implement even one token reform and failed to produce a democratic constitution. As much as the opposition leaders wanted the nation to believe that the 2013 constitution was a democratic one, the truth of the matter is it was not. Paul Mangwana, who was the ZANU-PF MP and co-chair of the committee that drafted that constitution, boasted soon after the referendum of 2013 that Mugabe had dictated that constitution. Here is a video clip of Mugabe boasting about that constitution.
The good thing is this constitution is no longer changeable by the principals, including Mugabe.
Sometimes Parliament thinks that it is so sovereign that it should control the acts. The MA principles. Quit. Mozora. Na mangwana wako. Mangama kufaira. Sometimes people fail to know where power has derived from.
Well. Mugabe reminded Monzora, Mangwana, and all the rest that he actually controlled them. And so it is no surprise at all that the Zimbabwe constitution, the new constitution, which the nation was told was one of the most democratic in the whole world, failed to deliver even on the most basic fundamentals, deliver free, fair, and credible elections. It failed to deliver the basic freedoms and human rights of the people of Zimbabwe. We should not be surprised by that. Because like Paul Mangwana admitted, that constitution was dictated by Mugabe. It was a dictator's creed. And it is naive to think that we could expect it to do anything else. We in Zimbabwe have been down this path for 46 years and counting. ZANU-PF has taken us down this path. And all ZANU-PF has been focused on and interested in is consolidating its own stranglehold on power. And the failure by the people to see this reality, even after 46 years, is one of the most tragic realities of our time. We are not going to change this system by pretending that it's working. It is not working at all. And that is the argument some of us have been trying to say, particularly on this platform.
You know, one important thing that we should mention, Wilbert, is that, particularly you and I have been getting a lot of stick when it comes to talking about how incompetent and how utterly useless the current opposition leaders are. People have come out and always said we are hating on them, we are, supporting ZANU-PF and so forth. But if we are to look at historical facts, and which are there as evidence for everybody else to check and see, you will find out that MDC-CCC has always been in ZANU-PF's pockets. And ZANU-PF has always made sure that each and every time they bribe and pay their way out of any situation. And that was no different when it came to the GNU, the golden opportunity where we could have ended all this mess and we wouldn't be here today. ZANU-PF made sure that Tsvangirai got his $3 million house, he's got his, his perks ready there, MPs, everybody else, ministers, deputy ministers, they were all catered for. And that became a very, very nice and cozy place for ZANU-PF and the opposition. They stopped opposing, basically. So even when SADC, and these are facts, when SADC came knocking to remind MDC, Tsvangirai and company, to say, you guys need to, implement the reforms that we came to this arrangement for. We need to do what this arrangement is for. No, they did not push for any reforms. Instead, they went and reported SADC to Mugabe to say, these guys are worrying me. These are facts. These are things that happened. The evidence is there to support it. So it is not just merely just hating on them. You're finding it now. Fast forward, we are on this here thing. We are finding ZANU-PF is being supported, in parliament by even the opposition itself. We never had an opposition. We should not say ZANU-PF outmaneuvered, the opposition. They never were competing. They were working together to make sure that ZANU-PF wins and they get a few seats on the table as well. And life continues. This is where we need to come to that realization that we have a big problem, that Zimbabwe, we have created a facade, a mirage in our minds, and we are living in a delusion. Zimbabwe is not a democracy. Zimbabwe doesn't even have an opposition. In fact, the opposition that is there is only ZANU-PF, except for the name. We need to realize that. How can somebody come up and tell you that we are going to fight for this bill and stay in the mountains when you were the closest? You failed to do it. When you had the golden opportunity, you failed to do it. Why did you have to go and do it at the mountaintop? We got to come to that realization. If we are going to move forward, if we are going to think of fixing this country, we have to come to that realization that the current opposition are nothing but incompetent, utterly useless, and junk, basically.
Well, you referred to opposition corruption. Here is a video clip of someone telling us a bit more about it. Whilst most Zimbabweans thought that the opposition corruption was limited to the E-Class Mercedes-Benz for the deputy ministers and ministers, the two prime ministers, and Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai, the very generous salaries and allowances all round, and other benefits. It's now beginning to emerge that the opposition leaders received a lot more in terms of bribes from ZANU-PF.
Bhazi rikafira musango, munhu asina kwaari kuenda mubhazi mumwe anofara kuti ndo patopumba pake nditori nevamwe vangu pasi. Munhu anorwadziwa nekurara musango, munhu ane kumba.
Taibhadana kumba kwangu.
Bada amana kumba kugombezi rangu rere. Mana so. But munhu asina imba hatete kurara musango. So opposition ino make sure kuti vanhu vaya vawane minda. But may he so rest in peace Vatsvangirai. Prazi ravo vanga vainaro. Chamisa anaro.
Anaro Chamisa. Ane family.
Kana azoramba. Ndoenda newe.
Rikupi.
Ane farm.
Ribi.
I know madresse munhu anetsa kuti focha, but anaro. Chakudza ofu kamera.
Okay.
Ane mine.
Ane mine.
Ane makaseo.
Yeah?
Yes. Biti. Ane prazi. Aunomboona here picture yabiti achitenga mombe kuna Temba Mlisco. Sekuisa kuprazi. One of the biggest beef producers in the Matabeleland region, the Washman Ngwe.
Okay.
Yes, ane prazi. Anautenga beneficiary land reform. But what they did is to discourage their people from acquiring my farms. Because why is out munakaona something chapiwa nehurumende hachapikisi.
Are you for real, Mr. Kansha?
No mfunza Washman Ngwe kuti haasi kuita beef here, producer beef here paplus. Tonyenda netsana upo chingono kuti there. Anditi stand ya upo chingono standard ine painogumira. But vakatotaura nehurumende nemasabu ika-extend because aita good.
Okay.
Yes, ane price. Anautenga beneficiary land reform.
This is the reality. The people risked limbs, livelihoods, and many have died to elect the opposition leaders with one primary purpose: to implement the democratic reforms which should have ended the ZANU-PF dictatorship. What happened? The opposition sold out. Instead of implementing the reforms, they were busy enjoying the benefits that ZANU-PF offered them, and they forgot about the reforms. No meaningful reforms were implemented during the GNU. The new constitution that was drafted during the GNU turned out to be a dictator's creed. So we are back to where we were talking about earlier on. ZANU-PF consolidating its iron grip on power. And as far as ZANU-PF is concerned, that has been the one thing the regime has ever cared about. They don't care about the suffering of the ordinary people. Zimbabwe in 1980 had the potential of becoming the South Korea of Africa. Our GDP per capita in 1980 was $6,000 US. It has since dropped to about $2,000 US per capita. 49% of our people are living in extreme poverty. Zimbabwe has never cared about that. ZANU-PF rather has never cared about that. All the regime has been obsessed about is power. They have rigged elections, used violence, and even killed people just to retain their iron grip on power. And all the political influence that goes with it. Even more so, the loot, the wealth that they've got from it. There is no doubt that the ruling elite and their cronies have become filthy rich at the expense of the millions of ordinary people living in abject poverty. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Mnangagwa rigged the 2018 elections and rigged the 2023 elections. And immediately after rigging those elections, he sought after consolidating his stay in office by creating this EG 2030 myth that he is the only man who is capable of delivering the economic miracle where Zimbabwe will be transformed from the failed state that it is today to an upper middle income nation by 2030. As I said, the GDP per capita today is about 2,000 US dollars. What Mnangagwa is saying is that by 2030, it's going to increase it threefold, so that it's 6,000 US dollars per capita. It's, of course, a mirage. But he doesn't care about that. All he cares about is consolidating his stronghold on power. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
Some of us have decided to live in the real world and to call facts for what they are. Standing up and saying that ZANU-PF is corrupt and that the opposition itself is equally just as corrupt is not a wrong thing and should not, warrant insult and all sorts of manner of evil sayings and thoughts. It's just the truth. I mean, the evidence is there. Whilst a lot of people were getting beaten, killed, 300 and something people were killed, only to have the MDC settle for farms and luxury. And forget about the families of those that had lost their loved ones, those that had lost their livelihoods. Shows you that they are just as corrupt as ZANU-PF themselves. And that is the truth. Another point is that we should not pretend that this CAB3 is a threat on a democracy. There was no democracy in the first place. Reports after reports say this. They state the same very thing that we are saying right now. So you cannot be saying, no, we are fighting for what we have when you really don't have anything. Your right to vote for a president. In 2008, they sat on the election results for over 2 months, a month and a half or whatever, just to count the votes, 5 million votes. It took them over 30 plus days. They robbed you. So why do you want to keep something that you don't have instead of fighting to have it all back? And the only way you can have it all back is to fight for reforms. We need to fight for reforms to fix a broken system. Since 1980, ZANU-PF has declared that it has to be us and no other. So when you go into that ballot box and say it's no other, whatever you're going to go and do, it's predetermined already. And I like the picture where, the ZEC chair lady is standing with Mnangagwa and they are speaking. Is everything set? He says, yes, sir, everything is all done. So what you are just doing is just routine. You're just going through the motions of an already rigged election. And the opposition has been dragging us along to say, let's go, this time we will win big, knowing fully well that it is impossible. But then they stand a chance to join in the gravy train. Better have something than nothing. They know that, they will get monies for election agents and everything. And then they don't even post election agents at most polling stations. They eat the money. We have to come to a realization that Zimbabwe is not a democracy. ZANU-PF, yes, is evil, is brutal. They're murderous thugs. But they have the most dangerous sidekick ever, which is the current opposition players, who are playing so that ZANU-PF wins and they get something out of it, leaving you and I hanging to dry. It's the truth. Everybody else around us is telling us, Zimbabweans, wake up. This is what is happening. Report after report, recommendation after recommendation, correction after correction. We don't want. We want to continue doing this. And then at the end of the day, we say, SADC is useless. The AU is useless. The international community is useless. They don't want to. They gave you the corrections. They gave you the recommendations. They gave you the report card. Fix it. You don't want. Then when you go into the main test, you fail again. They are the problem. The teacher is the problem. The vigilator is the problem. I think we've got a big problem as Zimbabweans. And I think we are our own worst nightmare, worst enemy, self-inflicted harm. This is what we are. This is what we do. And we don't have anybody else to blame but ourselves. Wake up, Zimbabwe.
Well, the ruling party has already come to the conclusion that the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 is a done deal. They may just as well say that, because they've managed to ensure that those in a position to say anything in this whole process have been bribed. Parliament right now, the opposition started falling apart. In fact, they imploded soon after the 2023 elections. And even those who had remained faithful to Chamisa have since been bought off. Like it or not, ZANU-PF is set to get his wishes on this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3. Like I said, we have come a long way. 46 years going down this route. And it has been a torturous 46 years. Because all ZANU-PF has been focused on is consolidating its own stranglehold on power. That's all the regime has ever cared about. And this bill is likely to pass, and ZANU-PF will have moved from a de facto one-party state to a de jure one-party state. Tomorrow, we'd like to take up on this issue on the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 and what it means for the country going forward. I hope some of you will be able to join us, and those who can, you can use the link at the bottom of your screen. We'll be using the same link for tomorrow's discussion as we are using today. Thank you very much, Ben. And for those of you who were able to join us, thank you again. If you can't join us, you can send us your comments. We'd like to hear from you what you think of this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 and where Zimbabwe is going. Thanks again to Ben, and thank you to all, and good night.